So we go see the oncologist, and he's like, yeah, you'd be dead in 6 months. So I came up with the idea that I'm going to spin the wheel of death.
Rod, how did you find carnivore?
Well, I actually found carnivore through Jordan Peterson. So I had seen Jordan Peterson on a few different interviews, and I think what was fascinating um, is that Dr. Peterson, I guess I should call him with him, to showing some respect for his credentials, but nonetheless, he had become a very polarizing political figure in Canada very quickly, and he had some health problem, a myriad of health problems happening at the same time. And his meteoric rise and his crash was interesting. It's like people will always pay attention when they see that kind of thing happening. And he was dependent on benzodiazepines. He had chronic depression, which was coupled by his polarizing position in the political landscape. And apparently he almost died, whether from a variety of different things. And anyone that's had experience with benzodiazepines knows that it's almost impossible to get off them, and it's quite dangerous. And then he roars back from the lowest point in his life, and becomes something that he never imagined. So when I was having my difficulties, my health problems, I had cancer a couple of times. I guess we'll get into that in a second. But when I had these problems, I was looking around to try to get out of the situation that I was in, which was I felt like I was going to die, and I thought I was going to die. And here's Jordan Peterson thriving, and he talked about this extreme diet, this this absolutely radical diet of eating nothing but meat and salt and water. So that's how I heard about it, and that's, I think, what convinced me. The fact that this guy, I think at that time, was on this crazy diet for 4 or 5 years and wasn't dead, and wasn't sapped of energy and depleted or whatever. And that's one of the reasons I decided to give it a try.
And how long ago was this that you made the decision to go ahead?
18 months, I would say.
Right, right. And you mentioned that there was quite a journey up to there. What was the what were you trying to resolve?
Well, I I think well, it was a number of things. And I think right when I started to consider the diet itself, probably some weight loss. I had a lot of different problems, one of them being chronic acid reflux. For 15 years, I had this acid reflux, and I'd gone to see a doctor about it several times over that super long period of time. And it was like, well, now we're going to try pantoprazole. And now, have you been trying just over the counter stuff? Yes. And Pepsid AC and Tums and Eno and um, all these different strategies to control this. And of course, when you have chronic acid reflux, you can have your esophagus getting eaten away by the hydrochloric acid, constantly splashing up from your stomach. And so I had that problem as well. And the fascinating thing is, and I think, I'm sure you've heard this a million times, when it finally went away and I went back to the doctor, my doctor wasn't that bad, not as bad as most, I'd say, but not a lot of curiosity. How come I was unable to deal with this issue even on its own for a decade and a half, and then you solve it in 2 days, and it never comes back? And it's just that lack of curiosity. It really drives you. But so there was a myriad of different issues, plus the idea about cancer feeding on glucose and glutamine, obviously, right? But as well, but to a lesser extent. But just trying to survive this latest cancer is part of the whole thing.
Uh, Okay, could you talk a little bit more about the cancer and diagnosis?
Yeah. So to be as time efficient as possible, um, when I was 48, I had urinated some blood, and it was January 1st. It was Canada Day, actually. So in the morning, I urinated some blood. So I'm like, oh. Now at that point, the story actually gets a little interesting, because at that point I had been on a ketogenic diet for 11 months. And I've done every diet known to man, the keto diet, veganism, Fit for Life, Body for Life, The Zone, South Beach, you name it, and I did it. And so when I did a diet, I would do it very strictly Atkins back a long time ago, right? If you remember Dr. Atkins, um, but I was very strict. I did not cheat on the diet. So 11 months. I have this episode. My wife says, you have to go to the doctor. Of course, me being a male, I'm like, yeah, no problem. It's resolved. It's not doing that anymore. It was just the once. I'm probably fine. After a lot of fighting, I go to the doctor, and he sent me for a lot of tests. He says, you should take this seriously. And I'm here to tell you that that should be taken seriously. It's because that's not normal. You can have blood in your urine for a number of reasons. Many of them are benign, but in my case, it wasn't. So I went for blood work. That was great. I went for a cystoscopy, with lots of with lots of protesting the entire time. By the way, as you can well imagine, that's where they put a small camera where things shouldn't be entering on the front of a male. So anyway, I got that completely fine, no problems at all. And then the last step was it was an MRI, it was a CAT scan, CT scan. Went for the CT scan, and turns out I had a tumor in my left kidney the size of a peach. It was 7.5 centimeters in diameter. No symptoms because I was in actually fairly good physical shape. Now, I do want to add the keto, even super strict, I lost maybe 10 pounds, which put me around maybe 195, usually 200, 205. I'm just under 5'10". So always been a little chubby my whole life. But so it turns out it reveals this tumor. I see a urologist. Urologist says your kidney has to come out. And of course, there's a lot goes on when you get a cancer diagnosis. Anyone that's been through that knows that. It's basically, there's a little dark cloud forms over you. It's almost impossible to shake, certainly for the first while. It took me about a year to resolve that. But anyway, within 15 days, they took my kidney out. I recovered from that surgery. It's not a nice surgery to have, but anyway, I did recover. And I got off the keto diet. So an interesting little aspect of the story is, here I was, completely healthy. I never ate GMO food. Like I was very careful, ate organic, all the rest of this stuff. I get cancer apparently. And then I'm sitting here because I'm hyper analytical, and I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, is the fact that I was on a ketogenic diet for 11 months the reason I got cancer? Because red meat causes cancer apparently. Or is it the only reason I'm alive? Like that was what was really, that was the big question that I could never, it's impossible for me to ever have an answer to. So I'm like, am I doing the wrong thing? Am I killing myself? Or am I saving myself? And that, I wrestled with that for the next 4 years. So, but anyway, the cancer had not spread after I got my biopsy back. So I was okay-ish, just a couple of big scars and running on my spare kidney, I guess. Luckily, I have really good kidney function. And then about 4 years later, now I sort of dabbled with keto here and there, because I still was kind of afraid of it. I did a bunch of research long before that for someone else that had gotten cancer, and I found the Gerson therapy, right? So another elimination diet, very similar to carnivore, but vegetables only and no sugar. Well, sorry, just some natural source sugar. So I got on sort of all vegetables there after the cancer. I'm like, okay, well, maybe I just can't eat meat. And I lost a little bit of weight again, nothing dramatic. But I kind of floated around, really didn't follow anything that closely. So 4 years after, roughly, that original cancer, I think, all right, well, whatever it was, maybe it was just an isolated thing. Maybe, because I thought, well, maybe I'm not somebody that was that was meant to live that long, because some people die. I mean, some children get cancer, right? So I wasn't bitter about it. I was happy that I had lived 48 years and whatever. So as all that process, that negative psychological headspace that I was in that whole time, which is natural, I guess, that started to fade. It was in the rearview mirror. And then 4 years later, I find a lump in my neck, which I still have, but a lump in my neck. And I'm like, what's going on here? It was May 16th, 2021. I'm like, what's going on with this? And so right away hit the internet, right? Because especially in Canada, our medical system is in collapse, basically. So it takes, a month and a half to see a doctor or stand in line for 3 hours at a clinic, walk-in clinic. It's a total disaster. So I look and it's like, well, you can have a swollen lymph node, but if it's swollen for more than 2 weeks, then see a doctor. So I waited just over 2 weeks. I'm like, okay, I went to a clinic. They looked at my history. They said, well, we're going to send you for some tests because you have a history of cancer. So they sent me for an ultrasound, and that test came back, blood work as well, because it always could be lymphoma as well. But the test came back and it was suspected metastatic disease. So if that was the renal cell carcinoma that I had when I lost my kidney, I would have been dead in 3 months. Like, recurrent RCC is deadly, right? It's fast. So that was, here comes the cloud again, right? And here we go again over the roller coaster. It's like, okay, I'm going to die again. So I thought I was going to die, kind of like, oh, maybe I'll make it. Now I'm going to die again. And I got kids and a career and everything. So and a wife, and we've been together 35 years. And so lots is going on there. So anyway, we don't need to know the whole process, but it took probably another 6 weeks just to get a diagnosis. And it was squamous cell carcinoma, throat cancer, unrelated. Right. And I'm like, and the doctors were asking me, well, how did you get this? I'm like, that's my question for you. You're the doctor, right? I don't know why you're asking me that. How do I know? I don't know what I'm doing wrong here. And it's interesting because that is the thought. What am I doing wrong? I still didn't eat GMO. I still ate organic. I still ate as clean as I possibly could. I still exercised as much as I could. So anyway, so we go see the oncologist, and he's like, yeah, you'd be dead in 6 months if you don't take treatment. And I'm like, okay. So the treatment is chemotherapy and radiation. And between chemo and radiation, for the type of throat cancer I had, which is, it's been a while since I had to deal with all that terminology, but it was P something, P1 positive or whatever it was. But basically, they think that type of throat cancer is a result of HPV, human papilloma virus. I'm like, how would I get HPV? They're like, you can get HPV from all kinds of things. I'm like, okay. I still don't know if that's what it was from, but it was the kind of cancer that it wasn't the smoking and drinking cancer. It was the other kind. It was HPV. And so the survival rate with chemo and radiation is 94%, that of people that get treated in a timely fashion are alive in 5 years. So they're like, well, the treatment is rough, because head and neck cancer is its own beast, right? Like almost everything you are as a human is right here. Your eating, your senses, your speech, your facial expressions, like everything. It's all here, right? Your eyes, your nose, your mouth, your teeth, swallowing food, ingesting food, like all this stuff, moving around, being able to observe, like it's high stakes when it's head and neck cancer or injury. So anyway, I did a bunch of, I don't know, I wouldn't maybe use the term proud, but I'm just like, I have an expectation of what my life's supposed to be, right? I'm not overly exceptional, but I put a lot of effort into life. And I'm like, you know what? Obviously, this is the second cancer, probably won't survive it. So I don't want them to cut me to shreds, because I was doing a lot of research, and it's like, okay, here are the list of toxic consequences from radiation. Here's the list of toxic consequences from chemotherapy, and did a ton of research and seeing people share their stories on YouTube, and like, it's rough. So I came up with the idea that I'm going to spin the wheel of death. I'm going to decline the chemo because radiation alone gives you an 80% chance of being alive in 5 years. Add the chemo, it only increases that chance by 14%. And cisplatin was the chemotherapy drug they wanted to give me. And with cisplatin, you have I believe it's around 35% chance of experiencing irreversible and significant renal damage, kidney damage. And I'm like, I only have one kidney as it is. Do I want to be alive? And the oncologists, they want you to do everything. And obviously I can't paint with a broad brush here, but it just feels like they're like, man, I ain't losing this guy because that's impacting my numbers. So I want him to do everything. Like, we'll go into his neck for surgery, which has a terrible side effect profile. And we want to hit him with the cisplatin. We want to hit him with the radiation. I'm going to save your life whether you want it or not. And I was like, okay, I don't want to be cut to ribbons. I don't want to be terribly disabled. I'm going to spin the wheel. So I took the radiation, declined the chemo, and then I consulted I tried to consult a naturopath, but I just could not get a call back from them. This was the nearest place that could give you vitamin C and all the other, naturopath stuff. But I ended up just going with the radiation. And I had some complications throughout the radiation. Boy, they didn't like the fact that I declined the chemo, by the way. Like, it was a full court press. Like, what are you doing? This is your life. And I'm like, yeah, tell me about it. I'm the one it's my life. I'm the one in the body, right? Like, I've made my decision, but this thing on my neck was getting really big. And it was starting to block the arteries going to my brain, and which caused this wild nausea and massive headaches on the right side of my head. And of course, I couldn't sleep on it. I still had trouble sleeping because these lymph nodes never went away. But, and I was having a hard time, continuing to move around. And so what my oncologist did is he put me on dexamethasone, which is a really powerful steroid, which I guess I'm not a doctor or a pharmacist, which acts as almost like cortisol. So, man, I started taking that stuff, and it was fantastic. I could see people being dependent on it, because I was only sleeping like 3 or 4 hours a night. I'm running around all day, felt like $1,000,000. My outlook was great. I'm like, my life's going awesome. Big thing on my neck, going to radiation. I'm like, there's nothing going on that's negative here. Everything's great. But that's how they were able to shrink that down enough to keep me in good shape to go through the treatment. Unfortunately, steroids like that cause hypoglycemia. Hyperglycemia, I think, is the proper word. So it's raising your blood sugar, which feeds the cancer. And I was not on any kind of diet per se, but I was doing. We have a business or a franchise up here called Booster Juice. So it's all natural juices into smoothies and stuff. And I'm like hitting the smoothies because my throat, like the radiation, you get radiation burns all over your neck, of course. And then the inside of your throat is being burnt because it's like being in a microwave. And so it was like I was drinking like boiling hot water. It was like scalded all inside my throat. It's tough to eat, all the rest of that stuff. But I made it through. Actually, I was quite resilient to the whole thing. I drove myself to and from all those appointments right to the last day, and still worked. I kept working all the way through. It's funny because I bumped into a patient when I was first, getting my orientation to go to treatment. And he's like, oh, it's not too bad. I worked all the way through. I'm like, if that guy can work, I can work. So right away, my heels are dug in. I'm like, I'm going to work. I'm driving myself. So I got through that whole thing. But radiation is incredibly damaging, like on a cellular level. And it takes a tremendous amount of resources out of your body for a period of about 18 months till you're fully healed. And certainly the first couple months is really bad and starts tapering off, but it's really, really damaging. And it's, I don't think most people can understand the level of damage that your body is trying to heal through that whole time. It's quite of a strange thing. But through that point, obviously I got off the dexamethasone because it's not good for you at all. And I hadn't changed my diet at all. But the big thing I was struggling with was every time I got a PET scan or an examination or any of these other things, I never got, like with the examinations, they're like, yeah, everything looks okay, but there's still a lot of healing going on. It's like, okay, well, that doesn't say, you beat it for now, or at least at least the treatment has worked for now. The PET scans, there was always activity in here. They're like, wow, there's still a little bit of activity, but we think it's more likely. This is the part that was driving me crazy. It's more likely to be inflammation than recurrent disease. And I'm like, more likely doesn't help me. So anyway, on and on it went, and I was really kind of beat up because I was beat up emotionally because I could never get a nice, clear result in any tests. This thing never went down. For a lot of people, these the lumps in their lymph nodes will go down. For me and some other people, I guess they don't, and mine didn't. And so, I mean, there's 2 lymph nodes that are still like rock hard. Apparently, it's because they're full of scar tissue, probably because I didn't get treatment soon enough. That's it. That's a different story, a medical system story. But anyway, one worth talking about on some other time. But and then they never went down. They're still full of scar tissue, so I had these lumps. But the lumps didn't go down. Couldn't get conclusive test results. It was, it just hangs over your head, and then they started to swell up again. And so there's this big panic. This happened a couple times. Run to the ear, nose, and throat doctor. Run to the oncologist. They're like, oh, they're sound the alarm bell. We need to get you in for an MRI immediately. I want you to go for another PET scan. Like, I've had 5 of these things, right? And they are not good for you. And, they look and they're like, well, no, it looks like inflammation. So every time that happens, and I think there's a couple of points that are really important to the story, is that every time that happens, you're digging yourself out of the hole, and then this thing pops up, and then all the doctors go crazy, and then you get a test result and they're like, well, we don't think it's recurrent disease. Like, it's up and down like crazy. And it's hard to explain that to somebody that hasn't experienced it. And it's a strange analogy, but I do want to share it. It's like you're sitting at home and you get a text message from somebody. They're like, hey man, the coast is clear. The Reaper is not in town. No one even knows where the Grim Reaper is. And you're like, oh, okay. All of a sudden you get a text in the middle of the night. It's like, he's in town. We don't know where. We don't know if he's close to your place or whether he's even heading to your place, but he's around. And you're like, and then the dark cloud goes. And then, a couple of weeks go by and you're like, okay, maybe get another text. We haven't seen him. Okay, great. All of a sudden another one comes, like, he's down the street. He might be heading your way. And you're like, he's back in town, and it's just, because it's this idea that when he decides to knock on your door, you're going to die. And for throat cancer, like, it's not a pleasant thing. Right. So of course I made all my own plans because I'm like, I'm not going out like that. And in Canada we have MAID. So I looked into that. So I've got all my ducks in a row should this thing turn sideways. So I guess that roller coaster kept happening. But as I got about a year away from, was it a year? Maybe shy of a year. As I got away, I'm like, well, I need to move on somehow. But I felt terrible, exhausted and beat up, and this roller coaster. I just couldn't get out of it. And I've always been optimistic and content and grateful for my life, and grateful, I'm not rich, but I'm okay. And, whatever. I've faced a lot of adversity, but I'm always like, man, there's always somebody that has it worse. But it was that cloud was always, hanging over my head. So, I was gaining weight. And I had all these problems. I would always get injured. If every time I started to try to exercise, and this was a lifelong problem, I would get tendonitis. I had tennis elbow in both of my arms for 3 years, raging tennis elbow from doing push-ups. And I think I was sharing this on another video that I did, but I could do maybe 5 push-ups my whole life, maybe 10. And And I'm like, oh, I'm just not an athlete. I'm not genetically like that. And oh, maybe mechanically they're hard for me, but I just couldn't do it. I could do other stuff, but not that. And so I got all this tendon pain and muscle pain. And I always thought it just hurts to be in a body. Like that's just what it is, right? I'd work out. I'm not that old. I'd work out and I feel like I fell down a flight of stairs. Like I had a lot of problems. So anyway, I kind of get into, I need to lose some weight. So, and then I bump into this Jordan Peterson thing, this all meat diet. And I do all this research because I tend to hyper focus and do a lot of research relentlessly, like every day. I do research on something. So I get into this carnivore diet thing, but I was afraid of it. It's extreme, right? I mean, we're all used to it now. It just makes all the sense in the world. But come from the outside when, it's like, oh, veganism, that's how you cure cancer. It's like, oh, I was a vegan. How come I got cancer? How come all these other vegans are getting cancer? But nonetheless, you're like, you don't know who to believe. And the doctors aren't helping you. And the nutritionalists and the naturopaths don't really have the answers, but they're coming around, I think, right? So I was really afraid of it. And I'm like, if it was meat that caused my cancer in the first place or caused it to come back, I'm going to end up killing myself. So it was high stakes for me. But I'm like, well, this guy was, Peterson was in rough shape. He was almost died. He's doing great. He's thriving, and credits it all. And I start looking, and I found everyone in the community, including you, Dave. And, I'm listening to all this stuff and I'm like, okay, I'm going to give it a try. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my doctor. I'm going to say, listen, I don't need any help from you. I need you to write me requisitions for testing, and I'll pay for it all myself. So full panels, like, lipids and blood sugar and thyroid and kidney function and you name it, right? C-reactive protein, like just everything you can think of, and I'll go pay for it myself. And I want like 6 of them. So he does, thankfully. I start on the carnivore diet. I'm like, I'm doing this. I started on the carnivore diet and I went 100% right off the bat. And within 2 days, my acid reflux went away. Right away, I couldn't sleep, but that happened when I did Atkins. As soon as I stopped eating carbs, I'm up all night. So, and I'm like, well, it is what it is. So in 2 days after, acid reflux goes away, and 18 months later, it never came back, by the way. That goes away. And I'm energetic. And I'm like, okay, well, I should start working out right away because I tend to just jump right in and do too much too fast, but that's okay. So I start working out right away. And after like 3 days, off comes 2 pounds. And I'm weighing myself every day. And I took pictures with my phone of the scale. And every day I'm losing a pound. And by the time I got to like 10 days, or 9 days, I think I'd lost 10 pounds or something. But one of the most interesting things that happened is I always had this big saggy chin. Like it sags here because I had radiation, but I always had I thought it was fat. No matter how much weight I lost, I always had this thing here. And, I'm not somebody that would get plastic surgery, but I thought, because I do television and I do a bunch of things, I'm like, oh, maybe I'll change my mind and someday I'll get the fat sucked out of here. So whatever. Well, I start the carnivore diet and that was gone in like 8 days. My whole jawline just sucked right up. And I'm like, I never looked like that in my life. And I wasn't getting sore when I was working out. And I'm like, what is going on? So this all sucked up. I lost all this weight. It wasn't fat. It was fluid. And I'm like, how could I be packing around all this fluid? And it's not water. It's like, it's inflammation. And I'm like, how could I be packing that around? And I'm like, I must have been chronically inflamed my entire life. And so this is I think for anyone that's on this diet, it's a journey of discovery. You're like, what is going on? Right? I've never seen changes like this before. And the weight loss kept going. So at my worst, like I said, I'm 5'10". Like I'm getting a little shorter because I have some kyphosis happening in my back. But I at my worst, I was 214. And I mean, I was fat, right? I looked at myself. I'm like, this is out of control. And so I would exercise and I would eat salads and a little bit of meat or chicken, just no red meat because that's terrible. No eggs. You don't want any of those, right? Because you're gonna have a heart attack, right? your your cholesterol is going to go up. It's so ridiculous now. But and I get back down to 200, but I was always hovering around there. Well, now I'm racing down, and within a month, I had lost like 25, 30 pounds. And so I lost the inflammation right away, and then the rest was fat. And now I'm like, and so my wife, of course, is losing her mind. She's like, "You're getting really skinny, like whatever it is, you need to stop doing it." Because I just was coming off of cancer twice. And I'm like, "No, man, I think this is proper. This is right. I feel like $1,000,000. I'm not getting sore, and my acid reflux is gone, and all these things, and I'm not getting tendonitis. I would get tendonitis all the time. And I said, I'm going to keep going. And I went and got blood work, and I think I might be a bit of I'm prone to high lipids when I'm not eating carbohydrates. Hyper responder. Anyway, what was it, Dave? What?
Yeah, lean mass hyper responder.
Lean mass hyper, except without the lean mass. So I think I think that's what it is, because my cholesterol still is way high, right? My doctor is used to it. He's like, yeah, your cholesterol is terrible. I'm like, we've had this talk. It's not terrible. It's normal. But anyway, so my cholesterol was high, but other than that, my blood is perfect. No C-reactive proteins, no nothing. And my triglycerides in the basement, way below normal. So my LDL is way high, my HDL is way high, and triglycerides are way below normal. So I'm in good shape. And so I'm like, okay, I think I'm okay with this. So over the next month, so 2 months in, I lost maybe another 5 pounds. But the interesting thing to anyone that is considering keto or is worried about that weight loss, just go with it, because I was losing a pound a day. And then as I got towards 170, for whatever reason, I was used to wear like 34, 36 pants. I wear 29s now. So as the weight's, it's flying off, and then it starts slowing by itself. My diet wasn't changing, but it was slowing down by itself as I got closer to 170. And by the time I got to 170, it stopped. I was 170 for, remember, this is an 18-month journey, right? But probably after about 4 months, 3 months, I'm down to 172, 170, and I'm losing like a pound a week, a pound a month. And it just stopped right by itself. All by itself, just stopped at 170. I think I was 168 a couple times, but I was really, really exercising a lot, but never below that, and pops right back up to 172. So anyway, and I'm pretty much the same size, a little bit heavier now. I put on a little bit of muscle, but I was starting to eat macadamias because I was being a little bit bad. I know it was the best choice of all the nuts, but I started eating macadamias. And for me, I think some people can tolerate some carbohydrate. I can't. If I eat any carbohydrates at all, I just start getting big again.
Yeah, I to be honest, I feel that's like a little bit of that lean mass hyper responder trait. It's like, get the carbohydrates out, your cholesterol goes up. Reintroduce any carbohydrate at all, and just your body can't tolerate it. Because I feel I'm the same with that too.
Yeah, that's been my experience, and I don't cheat on the diet. I was eating, macadamias. I mean, it's funny because there's so many aspects of eating this way that people miss. It is so, in the beginning, it's so difficult because I'm a child of the 60s. And, I remember in grade 9, my dad would give me $2 to buy lunch. And what do I buy? I buy a pack of Smarties and a Coke. And that's what I ate for lunch. It's a pack of Smarties and a Coke for a year. And, we're just trained, to be entertained by carbohydrates all the time. And that's just who we are. And that's really difficult for some people. But for me, and people that, so anyone that I talk to, they're like, oh, how can you just eat bacon, beef, cheese, eggs, fish and shrimp and all the rest of that stuff, right? But how can you just eat all that stuff? I'm like, because I don't want to feel like I used to feel. All my pain is gone. I feel like I feel better today than I did when I was 20. When I was 20, I'm like, I've been chronically fatigued my whole life. I just didn't know. I've been chronically inflamed my whole life. I just didn't know. And until you do it, and everyone I bump into, I'm like, commit to 35 days. Don't do it for a week and be like, well, it's not for me. Like, just make a deal with yourself. I don't care what you have to do. I don't care whether you have to make 4 pounds of bacon, keep it in a container, and every time that you want to go eat something like chocolate, just stuff a bunch of bacon. Like, do whatever you have to do. Make it 35 days and see if this is a bargain for you. If it's a good deal for you. Losing all the weight, get all your and I'm being, those are broad sweeping statements. I understand, but for me, all your problems are gone. See if that's worth not eating, chocolate with your friends when they're over trying to have a glass of wine. I chose not to drink as well. I haven't drank anything. It's not as like it was a drinker, but I don't think that helped my cancer situation at all either. The other thing I would throw out is people get the keto flu. When I did keto, and this might be an indicator, Dave, actually, because when I did keto, I didn't get sick. I didn't get the flu. It was people like, oh, you're gonna get the keto flu, and I got nothing. It was a walk in the park. But when I did carnivore, man, did I get sick. It was at about 2 weeks, I think, which is typical. But mine, it was 16 days because I counted. I kept a lot of records. 16 days, and probably 10 days out of that, maybe 8 days, it was excruciating, like just nauseous. And I remember just every time I would eat, I'd be like, I have to lay down. For some reason, when I ate, it was worse. And I lay down, and, after about 45 minutes, it would go away, and I was just fatigued. It was terrible. But when I came out the other side, it was unbelievable. So now it's been 3 years and coming up 5 months, 3 years and 5 months since my last day of treatment for throat cancer. Zero sign of it ever coming back, and a remarkable recovery as well. I can my swallowing's good, which a lot of times people they can't swallow food, they choke on food all the time. I did have a little bit of diminished peristalsis up high, but I'm okay with that. I never ended up having any extra treatment. I didn't have to do the chemo to stay alive. My taste is okay. I'm kind of an advantage for carnivore because sweet, I can't taste sweet as much as I used to. That's diminished a little bit. So even if I were to fall off the wagon and eat something sweet, it's not as rewarding as it used to be. So I got a little bit of an advantage from that. There's no well wind that doesn't blow some good, apparently. But also when you first start doing it, of course, you want to spread the good news because because it's like, man, this diet saved my life. And this diet gave me a life, like for example, right? I couldn't, if you remember, I couldn't do 5 or 8 I do 70 push-ups now. When it's raining outside, because I'm in the southwestern British Columbia, so it just pours rain all winter. I put 45 pounds. I put a backpack I'm in the firearms industry. So I put my plate carrier on and then a backpack. So I'm wearing like 40 pounds and I go up and down the stairs 60 times. I have to actually burn energy off. Whereas before I was always looking for a place to take a nap so I would have energy to do whatever it is I had to do. So just an incredible turnaround. And, I've shared it with a lot of people, and I have my own little portfolio of success stories. People like, oh, I lost 60 pounds and I don't have high blood pressure anymore. And, oh, my pre-diabetes is gone. My type 2 diabetes is gone. Anyway, I don't know. It's been an incredible journey.
That's awesome. So your wife was a little worried about this as you were losing so much weight. Has she she's got a better feeling about this now?
Yeah, of course. It's interesting though. I think maybe it's just our generation. I don't know. But some people, it is impossible to break free of eating the way that you're brought up to eat. Because if I told 10 people and invested my time into trying to get 10 people to try it without being obviously being nasty about it. But I'm just like, hey, man, I was going to die. 100% sure I was going to die. And now I've taken on all these new projects and I'm running around like I'm 20. And, you know, um, if I told 10 people, maybe 2 were able to do it.
Yeah, it's difficult. I mean, if you've been told anything your whole life by every authority figure out there and fed the same kind of information from the media and stuff, it's very hard to break out of that mindset, right?
It really is. And going back to something that I mentioned before, when I wouldn't say my oncologist is a rock star, but the ear, nose, and throat guy, ortholaryngologist, I believe, he is. But neither of those people, and even when I've seen the oncologist who had a resident with them, right, an oncologist in training, I will go there. I'd sit down. They would scope me, right, put the camera up your nose and down your throat, which is you get used to it, but yeah, not the most pleasant thing. And they're like, "Yeah, you look great. How are you feeling?" And I'm like, "I feel like $1,000,000, right? Like, I've lost 35 pounds. Blah blah blah." I tell them all this stuff. I made a remarkable recovery. Declined the chemo, still alive, doing wonderfully, not suffering the side effect profile like his other patients. And you know what I get for a reaction? Oh, well, that's good. That's good. All right. So we'll see you in 6 months. No curiosity, no nothing. Not like, how, look at this guy who looks better today than when he came for treatment before he had actually, before he got all beat up with the cancer. What is he doing? What is he doing different than my other patients? How can I, maybe he's got a secret that I can pass on to my other patients.
Yeah.
Maybe it'll save
What can
somebody's
we
life.
learn?
Nothing. That's frustrating, Dave. It's frustrating.
Yeah, it's just it doesn't matter what you it doesn't matter, what happens, what improves. If it wasn't something that improved based on the doctor's advice, then it's like it's almost like there's some kind of break there that they can't resolve something, so they just ignore it, you know.
Well, it has a lot to do with the way the medical system, at least for me, works in Canada. So the government determines, well, the College of Physicians and Surgeons for any given province or nationally, um, they set the standard of care is what they call it. So they're like, okay, this guy presents with throat cancer. It's whatever it's going to be. This is your treatment guideline for chemo. This is your treatment guideline for radiation. If it's recurrent, then you offer the surgery, and if that doesn't work, maybe give them some experimental, um, immunotherapy or something like that. Other than that, just chalk them up to lived or died or whatever, and how long did he live and when did he die, kind of thing. They cannot get out. If I could do it all over again, I would have, again, right? It's just you don't know. But if I could have done it all over again, I would have recognized this lump. I would have paid for my own imaging instead of waiting, because that's one of the things. And I would have paid to talk to an oncologist in the United States, which I could have done that for $300 instead of waiting a month to talk to the medical oncologist, because you see 2, right? The medical, which gives you the chemotherapy, and the radiation oncologist for the radiation. But you got to have consultations with both of them before you can start your treatment. I waited a month just to decline the chemo. But I would have loved to have a doctor say, listen, here's your options. First thing you need to do is stop eating all carbohydrates entirely, because you're feeding that cancer. And maybe I wouldn't have had to take the dexamethasone. Like, there's so many things that I know now, just being some dum-dum floating around and in society. I'm not a doctor. And the doctors are like, no, this is what the government says to do. This is what you're getting. Oh, well, maybe I'll do the carnivore diet so I'm not feeding the cancer while it's being irradiated. Oh, we don't know what that might do. I would recommend against it. Like, that would have been the answer that I would have got. So If I had to do it over again, or if it ever comes back, it won't now. I'm almost convinced of it because I'm not, for me, I think I was feeding cancer, and that's what gave me this problem in the first place. I don't think it's ever coming back, to be honest with you. But I would have went on a carnivore diet, no carbohydrates whatsoever, ate as much as I possibly could, and go to treatment, even, go to conventional treatment. But the diet, I think, is the linchpin.
Yeah. So what does the menu look like for you day to day?
Well, when I started, it was a lot of beef, and I even now after 18 months, I think beef is best. But I started hunting, so I was able to get an elk, which is as close to beef, and it's still a ruminant animal, which is great. So I eat elk, and not as much beef right now because I have that because meat's expensive. But it was beef, eggs, cheese. I can tolerate dairy. I don't drink any liquid dairy other than I do drink coffee. I know it's a sin. But I do drink caffeinated coffee with some coffee cream, 18% coffee cream in it. So I do drink 1 cup of coffee in the morning, and then I'll drink maybe a decaf at night as a treat, both with cream in it. But beef, bacon, eggs, and cheese. That's really the mainstay with my diet. Yeah.
And is that like 1 meal a day, 2 meals a day?
2. So when I started, of course, I was eating 3 or 4 times a day because I didn't want cheat. So I'm hungry. I'm just like, nope, make a steak. I ran to Costco, spent $600, bought all this stuff, brought it home so that I was, you have to set yourself up for success, obviously, right? Get rid of all the garbage food that's in your house as much as you can. Just, do the best you can. But a lot of steak and a lot of eggs. I go through times where I'll eat, 11, 12 eggs a day and not eating beef. So it depends how lazy I am or how busy I am. I'm a very busy person. So a lot of it depends on how much time I have.
Nice. So if you were giving someone advice on starting carnivore, what would you tell them?
Really, really those things, get rid of as much of the garbage as you can. Sit yourself down. And I think this is part of the key. Like I said, that 35 days, because if you make it 35 days, you probably will never eat, the way that you did again, because it's just a crappy deal. It's just, there's nothing in it for you to eat a chocolate bar or to, do the things that you used to do and eat chips and stuff. There's just nothing in it. It's just a bad deal. It'd be like somebody trying to sell you a car for 10 times the price. You'd be like, I'm not buying that car for 10 times the price. It's a bad deal. So that's, for me, that's what I do. And to be honest with you, the macadamias, I almost have a problem with those because it's almost like that one little thing that I will allow myself, but I was eating them too much. So what I did, I'd be sitting on the couch if I have downtime, right? That's the worst. I guess it's kind of like that with drug addicts, right? You have downtime and then their brain starts saying, go do this, go do this. So I was having a problem with the macadamias, and probably because they're so salty too, and it's like when you're on carnivore, right? The salt just hits your brain. And I find myself like just jumping up and going to the cupboard because I still buy them because they're not that bad, right? But I still do buy them for a treat once in a while. So I had to get to the point where I'm like, okay, I'm going to leave a bag in the cupboard. I'm leaving them there, a bag that's already open, not sealed. So it's just nothing to grab them. And I'm writing a piece of paper, put a paper clip on it. And it says on that piece of paper, it's in the cupboard right now, it says inflammation, cancer, weight gain, heartburn. Because if I eat too many of them, I'll get heartburn, right? So carbohydrates. I don't know. I think my genetics, I'm one part of my family's from Norway, so it's Nordic country, and the other is from the former Yugoslavia, from Montenegro. So Eastern European, like I was meant to eat meat. I wasn't meant to eat carbohydrates or vegetables. So I'm super sensitive to it.
Yeah. And I think that's a really, really good way of controlling yourself, is to get to the point where you can just label things. You've got a sticker on the food saying, don't eat this. Remember what's going to happen.
Well, and know yourself, like accept yourself, right? I mean, I'm not perfect, so I'm like, I know those macadamias. If I'm just sitting doing nothing or watching TV, I'm like, and just a little bit hungry, I know I'm going to go for them because I'm so strict. I've done so well. I definitely deserve to have a break from time to time, right? This is the mentality, right? This is the process that's going. So I'm like, I know that if I go there and I see that note, I'll be like, okay, do you want to have all those old problems? Do you want to feel like you're 75 when you're literally 41 years old, which is how I used to feel? This has been a lifelong problem, and I'm never going back.
So, Rod, how can people reach out to you? Do you have any way of getting in contact, any social media or websites?
Well, I sort of. I'm not a no carb celebrity like yourself. My work, yeah, I don't know. My work's different. Like I run the gun lobby in Canada. You can always find my work by looking up the Canadian Coalition for Firearm Rights or the CCFR.
No worries. Well, I'll link to it in the show notes. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story, Rod. I really appreciate your time.
Well, thanks so much for having me.